Okay, folks, so are you ready to kind of like really flex those brain muscles?
Because today we're going deep, and I mean deep, into thinking fast and slow.
Hmm.
You know that book by Daniel Kahneman?
Yeah.
Well, let's just say it's a brain twister. But hey, that's what we're here for, right? We're going to break it all down, all that good stuff. We're talking about those aha moments, the ones that can actually change how you think.
Absolutely.
So we're diving into these hidden biases that shape our everyday decisions. And trust me, once you see these mental shortcuts in action, you'll start noticing them everywhere you look.
It's true.
So to get us started, Kahneman, he says our brains, they rely on two systems for thinking. System one, and you guessed it, system two. So think of system one. How do I put this? It's like your brain's on autopilot, right?
Yeah.
It's fast, it's intuitive, emotional, always running in the background, making those snap judgments without you even realizing it.
It's true. Very efficient.
It's like when you dodge a ball flying at your face, or
Yeah.
you slam on the brakes when, bam, you see a red light. No time to overthink it, right?
Exactly. System one is all about efficiency, instinct, relies on those ingrained patterns, to help us navigate the world quickly.
Okay, so that makes sense, right?
And most of the time, it works great. But, and there's always a but, this efficiency, it comes at a cost.
Oh, there it is.
System one, it's prone to, those biases, those errors, because it's all about speed over accuracy.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Hmm.
So where does system two fit in then?
Is that when we, like, put on our thinking caps?
Yeah.
And actually analyze stuff?
Precisely. System two, that's our slow, deliberate analytical system, the voice of reason, right? Weighs the pros and cons, thinks things through logically, and helps us, hopefully make those more rational decisions.
Gotcha.
But, and this is a big but, system two, well, it's lazy.
Lazy.
It requires effort. And our brains,
Oh, yeah.
they like to conserve energy whenever possible.
It's like that friend we all have.
The one who's always down for a good time, but try asking for help moving. Gone.
Exactly. And
Right.
that right there, that's why it's so important to understand the dynamic between these two systems. It's like realizing you've got this powerful ally in your corner, for decision making, but needs a little nudge sometimes to really engage.
Okay, so how do we give system two that nudge then? I mean, how do we become aware of these biases and then actually make more, I don't know, conscious choices?
Well, awareness is the first step.
Yeah.
Once you understand how these systems work, you can start to see when system one might be leading you astray.
Okay, I'm listening.
And that's when you can consciously engage system two, pause, question your assumptions, and maybe even most importantly, seek out more information before jumping into a decision.
So it's like what? Having a superpower, seeing right through our own mental shortcuts
Yeah.
and making choices from a more informed place.
This is already blowing my mind and we're just getting started. You mentioned something earlier, something about an invisible gorilla. What's that all about?
Ah, yes. The invisible gorilla. It's a classic experiment. Shows just how powerful and limited our attention can be and how it all ties into this system one and two dance.
I'm so intrigued.
So in this experiment, they had people watch a video, right? People passing basketballs. And the participants, they had to count how many times the players wearing white shirts passed the ball. Simple enough, right?
Sounds pretty straightforward. I'd like to think I could handle that.
Here's the thing, though. In the middle of the video, a person in a gorilla suit, full-on gorilla suit, walks right through the middle of the scene, stops, thumps their chest like a gorilla, and then just walks off.
Wait, hold on. A gorilla, like for real.
A gorilla. And get this, a good chunk of people, they missed it completely.
They didn't see a gorilla. How is that even possible?
Because their system two, it was locked in, focused on
Sure.
counting those passes. So the system one, it just filtered the gorilla out. Irrelevant information.
Wow. That is wild. It makes you wonder, what else are we missing in our own lives? Just because our brains are so good at, deciding what's important and what's not.
Exactly.
This is where it gets really interesting, right? Because if our brains are always taking these shortcuts, how does that impact our everyday decisions? And we're not always counting basketball passes, but we are always bombarded with information, right?
Yeah.
Always facing choices, big and small.
That's where heuristics come into play.
Heuristics.
Mental shortcuts. Our brains use them to make those quick decisions, especially when we're low on information or time. Think of them as rules of thumb, helping us navigate this crazy thing called life without getting stuck in analysis paralysis.
Okay, I'm with you so far. So heuristics are like mental shortcuts. Got it. But what happens when those shortcuts, what happens when they lead us down the wrong path? Because I have a feeling even the best shortcuts, sometimes, they lead to dead ends.
That's the danger, right?
Yeah.
Relying too much on heuristics. They can be helpful, sure, but they can also lead to those predictable errors in judgment. And we don't even realize it half the time.
So what are some of these heuristics? The ones that, trip us up the most? Because I have a feeling we've all fallen prey to these mental shortcuts at some point.
Oh, absolutely. Two of the most common ones Kahneman talks about are the availability heuristic and the representativeness heuristic.
Mhm.
Understanding these can be a real eye-opener when it comes to recognizing our own biases.
Okay, so let's break those down. Availability heuristic. What's that all about?
So, the availability heuristic, it basically means we judge how likely something is to happen based on how easily we can think of examples of it.
Okay, so give me an example.
Let's say you just saw a bunch of news stories about, I don't know, car thefts. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You might start thinking car thefts are way more common than they really are.
Ah, so it's like that saying, out of sight, out of mind. But in this case, it's more like top of mind, therefore more likely.
Exactly. Our brains, they focus on those vivid, emotionally charged recent memories. Those are the ones readily available to us.
That makes a lot of sense. So how is that different from the, what was it, the representativeness heuristic?
Okay, so the representativeness heuristic, that's about making judgments based on how well something matches our, well, our stereotypes, our prototypes.
Okay, I think I'm going to need an example for that one.
Sure. Imagine you're at a party, right? You meet someone, they're super quiet, introspective, loves to read. Would you guess they're a librarian or a salesperson?
I'd probably say librarian.
There you go. A representativeness heuristic in action. We connect those traits, quiet, introspective, with the stereotype of a librarian, even though, statistically speaking, there are way more salespeople out there than
Oh,
librarians.
wow, that's so interesting. It's like even when we think we're being all logical, our brains are relying on these shortcuts that can lead us astray.
Exactly.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because one of the most fascinating things I found in the book is how these heuristics can really mess with how we see losses.
That's where things get really interesting. Loss aversion.
Yeah.
It gets right to the core of how we make decisions when there's risk involved.
Okay, so let's dive into this whole loss aversion thing. What is it exactly?
Well, basically, it means that psychologically speaking, losing something, it just hurts way more than the pleasure we get from gaining something of the same value, like at twice as much.
Ouch. Just thinking about it kind of stings a little. So are you saying we're hardwired to, like, feel those losses more intensely than gains?
Exactly. It's like that old saying, it hurts more to lose $10 than it feels good to find $10. Ring a bell.
Yeah, that's so true. I've definitely felt that way before. It's like that lost money, it had, I don't know, more emotional weight to it or something.
Precisely. And that's what makes loss aversion so powerful. It can make us, well, let's just say overly cautious. Risk averse, even when taking a risk, might actually be the smarter move.
Okay, that makes sense. Can you give me an example of how this loss aversion thing might play out in the real world?
Okay, imagine this. You've got a stock, right? And it's been steadily going down in value. Loss aversion, it might make you hang on to that stock for way too long.
Yeah.
You're hoping it'll bounce back, right? Even when everything's pointing to, well, further decline.
Because selling it would mean what? Like accepting defeat, admitting the loss. And that's just too painful to even think about.
Exactly. It's that hesitation, that fear of locking in a loss. And that can lead to even bigger losses down the road.
It's like, let me see if I can think of a good example.
Yeah.
It's like when you're playing poker and you've already put a bunch of chips in the pot. So you're like, okay, I'm in too deep now. I can't fold. Even if you've got terrible cards.
Precisely. Loss aversion at its finest. It makes us irrationally attached to what we've already invested, whether it's money, time, even emotional energy.
So this isn't just about money then, right? Loss aversion, it can influence all sorts of choices in all areas of life.
Absolutely. Think about negotiating a salary, right? You might be so focused on not losing by accepting anything less than your ideal number that you totally miss out on other perks, other benefits, even chances for growth.
That's such a good point. It's like we're so fixated on one little piece of the puzzle that we totally miss the bigger picture. So how do we fight back against this loss aversion bias? How can we make, smarter, more rational decisions when we're facing those potential losses?
That's the million-dollar question, right? One powerful strategy is, well, it's all about reframing your perspective. So instead of fixating on what you might lose, try to think about what you could gain by making a different choice.
So shift that mindset, huh? From fear and avoidance to like opportunity and what potential reward.
Exactly. Another thing that can help, Think about the long game.
Hmm.
What are the long-term consequences of your choices? Because often it's that aversion to short-term losses that can make us miss out on bigger, better things down the line.
This is all making me think about, the mug experiment. That was a trip. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, the mug experiment, a classic. It perfectly illustrates what's it called? The endowment effect. And that ties directly into loss aversion.
Endowment effect. Okay, I'm listening.
So picture this. They did this experiment where they split people into two groups, right? One group, they got a mug, just a regular mug, and then they asked them, hey, how much would you sell that mug for? The other group, they didn't get a mug, and they asked them, how much would you pay for one of these mugs?
So mug owners versus potential mug buyers. Got it. What happened?
The results, well, they were pretty wild. The people who already had a mug, they valued it at almost double the price that the other group was willing to pay.
Just because they owned it. Seriously?
Yep. Just possessing something, even for a short time, can totally warp how valuable we think it is. That's the endowment effect.
It's like we get attached instantly to things we see as ours, even if we didn't care about them before.
Exactly. And this has huge implications for, well, everything. We tend to overvalue what we already have simply because we have it. And on the flip side, we underestimate the value of things we don't have yet.
It's like our default setting is to keep things exactly the same, even if a change might actually be a good thing.
Well said. And that tendency, to overvalue our stuff and avoid those potential losses, it can really hold us back from making those rational choices that might actually lead to, more satisfaction in the long run.
This is all so eye-opening. It's like we're, I don't know, like peeling back the layers of our own minds. We're discovering all these hidden biases that are secretly controlling everything. So we've talked about these mental shortcuts, the heuristics, right? And how they can mess with us, leading to biases like loss aversion and the endowment effect. But how do we use all of this? How do we become more effective thinkers? So how do we actually use all this? I mean, how do we take all this knowledge and become better thinkers in our everyday lives?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? Kahneman, he talks about becoming an engaged thinker. It's about recognizing those biases, and learning to, question those initial gut reactions.
So it's about hitting the pause button on those automatic responses and instead engaging our more deliberate analytical selves.
Yeah. Exactly. And one really helpful technique is to consider get this, the outside view.
Okay, outside view. What's that?
It's about taking a step back.
Yeah.
Right. From our own, subjective experience. And we ask ourselves, how would other people approach this, a similar situation?
So it's like getting a second opinion, but from a more, a more objective perspective.
Precisely. Instead of getting caught up in our own heads, our emotions, our biases, we can tap into, the collective wisdom of others who have been there, done that.
Okay, I like that. Any other tips for, becoming a more engaged thinker?
Another big one is be careful. Be very careful of a good story. Because our brains, they love a good story. It makes things feel, clear, easy to understand.
Oh, yeah, I'm all about a good story.
Exactly. But here's the thing. A good story, it's not always accurate. Sometimes the most important info gets hidden, It's in the data, the statistics. And those don't always make for a good story.
So what you're saying is we need to look beyond the surface, try to find the full picture, even if it's not as exciting or, emotionally engaging.
Precisely. It's about training ourselves to be more, discerning. Don't just accept information blindly. Base those decisions on, facts, evidence, not just a good story.
That's so important, especially these days. It feels like we're drowning in information. Okay, so we've talked about making better decisions in the moment, right? But Kahneman, he also goes into how our memories, they actually shape how happy we feel overall. And that's kind of a whole other level of mind-blowing.
Right. This is where Kahneman's work gets, really interesting. He talks about what he calls the experiencing self versus the remembering self.
Two selves. Okay, now you got my attention. Tell me more.
Okay, so the experiencing self, that's the one in the present moment, feeling all the ups and downs, the good, the bad, of daily life. Then there's the remembering self. That one's looking back, reflecting on those past experiences, creating the, narrative of our lives.
So it's like two different perspectives on the same life.
Exactly. And the thing is, these two selves, they don't always agree on what makes for a happy life. The remembering self, it focuses on, those peak moments, the endings. It kind of forgets about how long an experience actually lasted.
So let me get this straight. Like a vacation, say it was mostly awesome, right? But then there was that one terrible day. The remembering self, it's going to focus on that bad day, even if most of the trip was great.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Kahneman calls this duration neglect. And it really changes how we think about happiness. We make choices based on like how we think we'll remember something later instead of how it's actually feeling in the moment.
Wow. It's like our memories, they can trick us. They shape how we see happiness, and it's not always, accurate to what we actually experienced. So if our memories are so powerful, if they really can influence our well-being that much, how do we use this? How do we create a more, I don't know, a more fulfilling life?
Right? It's a question we should all be asking. If we know that our memories, they latch on to those peaks, those endings, well, maybe we can be more mindful, right? Savor those positive experiences. And maybe even more importantly, find ways to end those chapters, those experiences on a good note.
So it's not just about chasing those big, exciting moments, right? It's
Hmm.
about really appreciating the little things
Yeah,
and finding ways to, like, wrap things up on a positive note.
exactly. It's about creating a life that's full of those, memorable moments, but also a life with like a sense of overall satisfaction, contentment,
Hmm.
you know.
This has been incredible. We've uncovered these hidden biases that, they're secretly pulling the strings, explored the power of heuristics, and we even, like, questioned what happiness really is.
It's been a pleasure diving into all this with you.
Absolutely. And if there's one thing to take away from our deep dive into thinking fast and slow, it's that, well, understanding how our minds work. That's power. It lets us make smarter choices, more deliberate choices, and hopefully it leads to a more fulfilling life. We hope this deep dive has given you a lot to think about. And until next time, keep those brains engaged. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.